My first thought when I was told to make a video on Zohran was, well, I don't live in New York, why the hell would I care about who their mayor is? I hardly know who my own mayor is, but the media made damn sure that I, along with all of you, know who exactly Zohran Mamdani is, and everyone in the world has an opinion on this guy, apparently. It's become clear to me that the only two positions that matter in American politics are the President of the US and the Mayor of New York for some reason. But then I started to see why. A communist, terrorist, Arsenal fan, who wants 1 million more 9/11s to happen and will impose Sharia law and personally commit jihad to every sweet little white child in America, is going to be the mayor of the largest city in the country. Zohran Mamdani is the most interesting Democrat in America, a Ugandan-born Indian Muslim democratic socialist who embodies both the left's greatest hopes and its oldest traps. He has the charisma and speaking abilities that we haven't seen since Barack Obama. He's undoubtedly the rising star of the Democratic Party, whether anyone wants to admit it or not.
The fastest rising star right now in Democratic politics is Zohran Mamdani.
He's not the only star. We got a lot of stars.
However, even before his election, he's already displayed instances where even his most vocal supporters are concerned about him backtracking on his rhetoric and engaging in doublespeak. This roller coaster of hope, feel-good politics, and ultimately showing early signs of capitulating to the failed messaging of the Democrats is something that we've seen before. And from the party side, instead of the Democrats listening and learning from Zohran, they appear to have disregarded all that has got him his popularity in the first place, choosing instead to go the route of molding him to their preferences, ensuring he does not exceed their boundaries in the future, while silencing him slightly more every day to ensure he respects boundaries going forward, and to gradually diminish his original messaging. There are many reasons I would say Zohran has become such a polarizing figure in American politics, but two stand out as usual. Those big issues here being socialism and being pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist. Zohran did what every Democrat strategist in America would have told you would be impossible. He won a primary with a people-first affordability platform focused on rent-frees, fare-free buses, city-run groceries, and more things that made billionaires think he was Mao Zedong. All while having a loud pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist message as the backdrop. He didn't win and rise to popularity despite his pro-Palestine stance, but in fact, it without a doubt helped propel him to the level he is at. No question about that.
I was somebody who began my journey in organizing and in politics by co-founding my school's first Students for Justice in Palestine. The struggle for Palestinian liberation was at the core of my politics and continues to be.
Zohran was not only what we all wanted, he was what we needed. But with his rise in popularity, things started to seem a little off. After his primary win, as consultants and new staffers drifted in, the hedges crept in as well. I'm against Zionism, but I'm pro-Palestine, but I'm a democratic socialist, but maybe it's ambition, maybe it's the party promising a longer runway, but Zohran is not a puppet. He has the ability to stick to the progressive messaging and stand up against Zionism and for Palestine. He has the ability to reshape the party as a whole. However, the question is, will he? Zohran's story so far has many layers to it. It's a story of a class struggle, racism and Islamophobia, popular left-wing principles gaining momentum, genuine allyship and advocacy for marginalized groups, but at the same time, it's a story of becoming more electable, of upholding Zionist structures via diet liberal Zionism, navigating the inner workings of the Democratic Party, and the topic of purity politics.
You did a great job.
I don't want to get too deep into Mamdani's backstory, but there are a few things worth mentioning that show he's not just vibes. His resume may not be as impressive as corrupt rapist Nepo governor or guy who lives in real-life Sopranos.
Because if you're under 30, Cuomo's always flirty.
Andrew Cuomo is a creep, slapping fannies and killing grannies.
But his track record is positive. He helped force relief for taxi medallion drivers crushed by predatory loans. After a 2-week hunger strike that he joined, the city reached a deal with the largest medallion lender to restructure debts with monthly caps and a city guarantee that drivers kept their homes. Mamdani broke a 15-day fast when that deal landed. He backed good cause, a shield that requires a real reason to evict and blocks sudden, outsized rent hikes and pushed back when lawmakers floated watered-down drafts stuffed with exemptions that would leave many renters unprotected. He pushed public power. When New York passed the Build Public Renewables Act in 2023, empowering NYPA to build public renewables, he was among the lawmakers and organizers championing it as a climate and affordability win. He pitched fare free buses as an anti-poverty policy and put it in his platform next to city-owned grocery stores. New York even ran a successful 5-route pilot in 2023-4. In 2020, he defeated incumbent Assembly member Aravella Samotas in the Democratic primary for Astoria's Assembly District 36, running as a DSA-backed small donor challenger. He joined Astoria residents, environmental justice groups, and local officials opposing NRG's gas plant, and on October 27, 2021, after more than 6,000 public comments, New York's environmental agency denied the air permit. He authored the Not on Our Dime bill to bar New York nonprofits from funding Israeli settlement activity. He vocally supported economic relief for undocumented workers during COVID, praising the $2.1 billion excluded workers fund that Albany created in 2021. He co-sponsors a winter eviction moratorium to halt residential evictions during cold weather months. Bottom line is his record thus far shows he makes the right choices. Debt relief over collection, tenant protections over exemptions, public build-out over private deals, and cheaper rides over fares. He picks rules that most people can actually use and works to implement them.
You filthy animal!
Every Muslim politician in America eventually gets an Islamophobia test. Actually, to put it in a better way, the test never ends, and the Islamophobia pitted against them just continues and gets worse. Prime examples of this are the continued racism faced by congresswomen like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. For Mamdani, Islamophobia has likely always shadowed his political journey, but his meteoric rise amplified it to levels rarely seen in such a short time frame. From Republicans, it manifested in extreme racism and hateful garbage, hysteria of Sharia law, and the azan playing over loudspeakers every morning in Times Square, calls for denaturalization, deportation, and worse. There were too many examples to pick from, and it showed what we already know, that the Republican Party is full of racist Nazis. However, the full-blown racism on display by the Republicans was not denounced by Democrats at all. Instead, they echoed this garbage. One example is when Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York falsely claimed that Mamdani had made references to global jihad and asserted that Globalize the Intifada, a call for Palestinian liberation and battling injustice, is a call to kill all the Jews. Another is when freshman rep Laura Gillen, also from New York, accused Mamdani of a deeply disturbing pattern of unacceptable anti-Semitic comments. Or when Cuomo laughed during a radio segment about Zohran cheering another 9/11. From Zionists on both ends of the aisle, it is the smear of anti-Semitism when criticizing Israel in any capacity whatsoever. This tactic of equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism is getting tired and less effective by the minute. But an interesting part of this is that this tactic has not seemed to lose its effectiveness when the target is a Muslim, as Zionism has become harder to defend on its own moral and historical terms, particularly as Israel's violence, apartheid-like policies, and human rights violations are documented in real time. Its defenders have increasingly turned to Islamophobia as a psychological shield rather than a logical argument. What makes this move powerful is that it works through inversion and projection. The accusation of anti-Semitism becomes a pretext to reroute the public's emotional energy away from empathy for Palestinians and towards suspicion of Muslims. It's a form of moral outsourcing. The more indefensible Zionism becomes, the more its defenders rely on the pre-existing Western association of Islam with danger, fanaticism, and violence. In this sense, Islamophobia doesn't just protect Zionism, rather it becomes Zionism's defense system. It cloaks the ideological fragility of Zionism in a moral panic that feels self-righteous and familiar to Western audiences. In effect, Zionists have weaponized Islamophobia as a moral laundering mechanism. It's the perfect trick for an ideology in decline, and Zohran is an example of it being used successfully on a large scale. And then there was a fourth group, a group that maybe went unnoticed by all of you, but I know for a fact Zohran sensed their presence like a whispering shadow at the nape of his neck. A group that may be even more Islamophobic than the other three combined. That's right, the Hindutva nationalist freaks. Zohran may be Indian, but he may as well be a Pakistani imam to the Hindutva nationalists. White people's Islamophobia simply can't compare, and that is why as a Gujarati Indian Muslim, I think he is primed to handle Islamophobia like no other. Hindutva nationalists are so Islamophobic they literally support Israel just because they like Muslims dying. Anyways, all that Islamophobia started to make it feel less like a political debate and more like a stress test for what America refuses to outgrow, which is their need for a Muslim villain.
And now, a message from our sponsor.
The map of endorsements told the real story. Early came Jews for Racial and Economic Justice and the Working Families Party, signaling that Mamdani's base of organizers, tenants, and left-wing faith groups had his back long before the machine ever looked his way. This was even before the primary. Unions followed cautiously and eventually endorsed Mamdani. Then came the political class. Governor Kathy Hochul finally endorsed Mamdani in mid-September, after months of keeping her distance from DSA-aligned candidates, praising his dedication to public service while noting that they don't agree on everything. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries shamefully didn't weigh in until October 24th, just a week before early voting started.
I mean, I asked you if Mamdani was the future of the party, and you didn't answer the question. You said the House Democrats are. I would note that at least a couple House Democrats from the New York area are not endorsing Mamdani. Your endorsement took a long time. Schumer still has not endorsed him.
And then there's Chuck Schumer, the most powerful Democrat in New York and one of the most influential figures in the entire party, who just refused to endorse Zohran.
Are you going to vote for Mamdani? That's enough. Excellent. The classics never get old.
What happened to vote blue no matter who? Compare that to Eric Adams 4 years ago. Just days after winning the New York City mayoral primary, Adams was invited to Washington by then Speaker Nancy Pelosi and showcased as a model candidate by the head of the Democrats' campaign arms and warmly welcomed at Joe Biden's White House. Zohran Mamdani's Washington trip after his primary lasted about 4 hours. No meeting with senior Democratic leaders. He was snubbed. Even after Mamdani won the entire election, Democrats are congratulating everyone across the country in their respective wins and just pretending Mamdani doesn't exist. It is insane. It is a risky game that they're playing, though. It proved the Islamophobia we referenced before bled straight into political calculus. But there may have been a miscalculation. If a Muslim socialist could win without their blessing, what did that say about their control?
No way.
Every campaign has its noise, some of it's valid, most of it's garbage. First, the serious critiques. The conservative case against Zohran isn't totally idiotic if you are an idiot. It's rooted in anxiety. Rich people and random poor people that think they will be rich one day, they argue that all the rich people, who a third of their income taxes are from, will leave if you tax them another 2%. The reality is that, in the big picture, very few leave over that. Here are a bunch of good studies linked that you can send to anyone that suggests that possibility. And for the handful of people that are passionate about moving from New York to Florida, honestly, that's a public service. You're boosting the average IQ of both states in one move. Well done.
Job well done, lad.
Then there's the favorite talking point, which is free stuff. The claim that things like fare free buses are a fantasy. The truth is the pilot program existed, it worked, and it was funded. It's not free, but it's paid for on purpose. The right's version of fiscal prudence has always been to underfund what works and then call it a failure. Zohran's answer flips the logic. Fund it until it works, and then watch people wonder why it took this long. Supply collapsed while rents climbed. The right's answer is deregulation. Zohran's is something more surgical. He wants to use public land for social housing, rewrite 421A so affordability isn't a rounding error, streamline conversions and permitting so construction doesn't die in committee. The right warns that public ownership in energy could break the grid. The Build Public Renewables Act shows otherwise. That's the conservative case at its best. Concerns of taxes, safety, housing, reliability, capacity. At worst, it's essentially killing yourself and all your friends so billionaires can have even more houses and landlords can charge even more rent and evict even more freely. Now to the scandal carousel. Auntgate, where Zohran called his aunt instead of his second cousin once removed or some other weird white people shit. Admissionsgate, when an old college forum where he wrote that he was African American because he was born in Uganda became more of a concern than Cuomo being a literal rapist for some reason. That time when he didn't recognize Piano Man in a music guessing game on TikTok. There was a scandal about him eating with his hands, which really pissed people like Laura Loomer off. Speaking of Laura Loomer, here's a video of her literally eating dog food with her hands.
It clearly says dog food topper, and I'm going to put this in my mouth right now. So it tastes like meat, and maybe that is disgusting to you, but I'll show you right here. Look, this is the bison product right here. It clearly says dog food topper. You can see on camera.
Each story started with some white Mr. Beast 1488 tweet, ended with a JD Vance and Elon combo retweet, and revealed nothing except how racist and stupid they all are.
Now, one of my favorite things to have for lunch is biryani, which, much like sushi, can be eaten with your hands. You know, sushi is made by your hands and eaten by your hands. So it's really convenient if you don't have a spoon or a fork, you know. I mean, it's really convenient if you don't have a spoon or a fork. You can just go right in, eat with your hands, not messy at all. And if your hands are dirty, you can just, you know, in my culture, it's actually really normal to eat with your hands. And you know, there's so many foods that were meant to be eaten with your hands, like, for example, this combo pizza. Now you may notice there's pepperoni on here, which is okay. Just kidding, this is turkey pepperoni. If you eat pork, you will face capital punishment. Now, one of my favorite snacks that you can easily eat with your hands as well is cereal. Have a nice bowl here. Now, I'm one of the kind of guys who likes to let the milk soak in for a bit to really get that flavor in the cereal, you know? And you can use your hands just like that. But you know, I am normal just like everyone else, and not everything needs to be done with your hands, you know? For example, when you're having a nice drink of water to wash things down. Now after dinner, I like to finish with dessert, so we have some birthday cake here. And the most important thing about cake is to make sure you're not eating too much or too little. You get the perfect bite, so you have to cut the exact amount. Alhamdulillah.
I'm rich! I'm rich!
Having a socialist mayor, I think, would be catastrophic for New York.
He didn't respect what the heart of New York is and was and always will be, the American dream. He better get hip to that pretty fast, and that includes meeting with investors like me.
A communist as the mayor of the largest city in the nation.
Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires.
Do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism.
Strip away the noise, the outrage, the tweets, the Islamophobia, and what you're left with is class. It's always class. Every moral panic, every smear, every concern about tone or language or anti-Semitism or decorum is just a translation of fear that someone might start redistributing power. The entire political establishment, from the right-wing billionaires writing checks to the liberal pundits begging for balance and coalitions, understood what Zohran represented long before most voters did. It wasn't religion. It wasn't even Palestine. It was that he broke one of American politics' unspoken commandments. You can talk about fairness, allude to equality of opportunity, but you cannot, under any circumstances, talk about class. That's why the donors panicked. That's why Bloomberg, Ackman, Loeb, Lauder, Diller, and every other billionaire with a second home in the Hamptons suddenly rediscovered civic duty. They saw a threat to the economic firewall that protects their world from the rest of people. What happens if people stop believing rent hikes are inevitable? What happens if working people realize they can demand not charity, but ownership? The nightmare to them is not revolution. The nightmare is the realization which leads to revolution. Class war in America has always been disguised as something else. When a politician challenges Wall Street, it's called populism. When they mention landlords, it's demagoguery. When they question Israel, it's anti-Semitism. The point isn't to win the argument, it's just to change the subject. Because if we ever started talking plainly about class, we'd start noticing how many of our ideological differences are actually class struggles. Even the democratic establishment's fear isn't moral, it's fiscal. That's why Islamophobia hit differently here. It wasn't just racism. Although it was a lot of racism. It was class discipline disguised as culture war. It's not new either. Every transformative movement in American history has been sterilized by moral panic first. Abolition was smeared as extremism, labor unions were accused of communism, civil rights leaders were branded outside agitators. The people in power never argued the issue, they argued the character of the person raising it. And the goal is always the same, to keep the working class too divided, too distracted, and too afraid to realize how powerful it could be if it ever saw itself itself clearly. The real story of this election isn't whether New York is ready for a socialist mayor. It's whether America is ready to admit that every political fight is a fight about class. That the reason so many elites, consultants, and donors hate Zohran isn't because he's Muslim or radical or wrong. He's naming the one thing you're never supposed to name in public life. Because once you say it, you can't unsee it. Zohran Mamdani is the mayor of New York City. A Muslim, socialist, Ugandan-born Indian is about to run America's largest city. His win is practical proof of something much bigger. He showed the establishment that they were wrong. He showed that popular policy can win elections. Free buses, rent freezes, public grocery stores, publicly owned renewables. Just won an election in the capital of capitalism. Then there is the support of Palestine, which says something profound about what kind of politics can actually win in America now. If you thought solidarity with Palestine was political suicide, Zohran just proved you wrong. Definitively. Then there's the money. Over $30 million thrown at him to try and stop this from happening. Donors versus people, and people won, and that matters. The election night itself was nice to watch as well. Young organizers dancing, tenant activists crying, Palestinian flags flying openly in New York, immigrants and working class people celebrating a victory they actually believed in. It was special. So yes, there are legitimate worries and critiques and reasons for skepticism, all of which we'll keep talking about. But Zohran is probably the best politician in the Democratic Party by a long shot. He also represents so much more good than I've ever seen from an American politician ever. If I was a citizen of New York, I would have voted for him without hesitation. There are so many positive things about this win, and it really feels like one of those moments that will be remembered in books and documentaries and talked about forever. Zohran Mamdani is New York City's mayor. That alone is cause for celebration. The good guys won. Let's enjoy it. Alright, that's enough enjoyment for now. Let's grill that lad. Or better put, lay the foundations for accountability. A persistent criticism of Zohran doesn't come from the right, but rather from the movement that built him. It comes from people who know how a radical message gets domesticated by power. They've watched too many figures begin with a moral clarity and end with a slogan about balance and coalitions. The concern isn't that he has turned moderate, but that he might be learning to translate conviction into euphemism. That's how the party absorbs its brightest insurgents, through the gradual domestication of tone. A new vocabulary arrives, inclusive, pragmatic, coalition-minded, and before long, the music of dissent is replaced by the sound of careful governance. Mamdani said he would not bar Zionists from serving in his administration. He meant it as a statement of civic equality, that City Hall would hire on merit, not ideology. But in this context, it reads differently. A week later, the campaign added a former NYPD public safety advisor, a routine decision for any mayoral team, yet symbolically jarring for a movement whose chants once filled the streets with "abolish the police." Two gestures which were meant to project competence instead triggered deja vu, the slow neutralization of a radical project through reasonable staffing. Then came the Netanyahu reversal. Mamdani said that if the International Criminal Court ever issued a warrant for Israel's prime minister, New York should help enforce it. Actually, I think this was after the International Criminal Court did issue a warrant, and he said that if Netanyahu came to New York, he would arrest him. That line echoed all around the world. It was a rare instance of an American politician speaking about Gaza with moral precision. Then he backtracked himself. City lacks jurisdiction in matters of international law. Technically true, but politically deflating. For many of his supporters, this was the first visible retreat that really hurt. Not long before that, another retreat came over the phrase globalized intifada. What began as a proud slogan of solidarity was quietly re-explained into metaphor once national networks framed it as extremist. In early interviews, he defended it as a call for liberation everywhere, but by late fall, he was denouncing those words. For a politician who built his rise on moral precision, this tail behind his leg retreating was alarming. The thing is, it wasn't capitulation. It was intentional calibration. The instinctive step backward that signals a candidate entering the gravitational field of the Democratic mainstream. Taken together, these moments form a pattern that activists recognize immediately. That being soft progressivism, the governing style which delivers moral language, but in exchange for structural continuity. It produces tangible, visible benefits that prove government can still work. Things like fare-free bus pilots, rent freezes, grocery co-ops. But those wins are almost always budgeted executed alongside the continuities that matter more, like a $12 billion police department, tax breaks for developers, a federal government that continues to arm an occupation abroad. The state offers comfort at the edges precisely to protect violence at the core. That is the essence of the critique. Soft progressivism trades hard justice for easy compassion. It gives the public something to feel good about. A cheaper commute, a visible park renovation, and so on, so that it can live with the larger things that never change, like who controls property, who polices poverty, who profits from war. It converts moral urgency into managerial competence. The citizen feels progress, and the system feels safe. It's also important to understand that every one of these critiques of Zohran are warranted. They should be thrown with full force because he used those convictions to earn the trust and energy that powered his campaign in the first place, and if he now retreats from them, the same passion that lifted him has every right to hold him accountable. The lesson that every democratic reformer eventually learns is that small reliefs pacify faster than confrontation. The result is a system that appears gentler while the foundation stayed the same. But inclusion is not neutral when it extends to those who rationalize atrocity. And yet, one puzzle remains. Why soften at all? He would have won anyway. The country is shifting. Moral clarity pulls better than fear. So why sand down what worked? Whatever the motive, it feels and felt unnecessary. He already had the crowd, the message, the momentum. The only thing left was to stay true to the original messaging. The system doesn't need to crush its reformers when it can just convince them that survival is the same thing as change.
Perfect. I look forward to meeting with Jamie Dimon and meeting with anyone who is concerned about the future of our city and is invested in the vitality of that same city. I think it is critically important that we start to embody a style of leadership that does not demand agreement across every single issue in order to even have a conversation.
Purity politics has its own traps. The instinct to keep every hand clean can leave the work undone. Movements need idealists who never compromise, but they also need people willing to pick up the paperwork and make average people's lives better now. Coalitions can and should be forged, and that is probably just good politics for whatever your cause. I understand there's a deeper argument that even that actually may be negative long term, there's an accelerationist case for it, but there can be a point where refusal turns from principle into paralysis. You can't redistribute anything in the moment if you never touch the levers of power. I think there is merit to both sides of the argument. There's merit to the idea that small progress now is amazing and should be celebrated, especially during times like this. And there's merit to the side that thinks of small progressors as a tool of the system and the enemy of any sizable revolution. I need to spend a lot more time on the subject of purity politics to figure out where I stand properly. It probably will fluctuate throughout time and maybe even differ instance to instance. But at this moment, I am a fan of Zohran. I do feel hope and progress, even if I am a fool for feeling that way. In the end, Zohran Mamdani is a mirror. Every faction in this country sees a different reflection in him. Some see a hero, others a threat, a disappointment, a prophecy even. The establishment looks at him and sees danger dressed in competence. The left looks at him and sees hope dressed in compromise. The media sees novelty. But what he really represents is a test, whether moral clarity can survive contact with the powers that be. A young Muslim socialist winning as mayor is like a small miracle. It is also a reflection of what people want and the magnitude in which they want it. If Zohran can hold on to even half of what made him dangerous, he could become the first American politician of this century who forces the system to adapt to him instead of the other way around. If he can't, he'll still have done something most never will. He reminded people that politics has room for truth, that truth could still sound human, that solidarity is real and meaningful. But every person who believed in him also carries a quieter fear. Fear that the critiques and skepticisms might one day be proven right. That the same machinery we spent thousands of words describing might grind him down too. We don't want to be vindicated. We want to be wrong. Because if Zohran remains true to himself, it will do more than vindicate his campaign. It'll vindicate the belief that democracy can still be an expression of conscience. And if he doesn't, then for one fleeting moment, we witnessed what it means for someone to speak without fear. The tragedy will be if moments like that are all we ever get. If brief flashes of truth always die when the machine resets itself. And maybe that's just how the machine survives. It survives by letting us glimpse freedom and hope just long enough to remember what it feels like. The illusion of motion that keeps us from burning it all down. And to all of the doubters, the racists, the haters, everyone, at the end of the day I ask, What's the worst that could happen?
People of New York, we have heard your voices. You've made yourselves loud and clear. You want buses to be fast and free, and they will be free for Hamas. Hamas will be using these buses for combat vehicles, joyriding, whatever else they want. When do I get to use Air Force One? Or the Batmobile? Do you guys have like a mayor-mobile, like a private jet, anything? Your rent will be frozen if you convert to Islam immediately. When do I get the nuclear codes? The mayor of New York has that, right? Furthermore, women driving, starting today, illegal. Done. Execution. Immediately. Yo, real quick, what's the salary for the mayor? It's like a lot, right? We will also be spending your tax dollars on swords or beheadings, Qurans in every single classroom, and PE and sports will be replaced with mandatory jihad combat training. The budget for the NYPD is how much? Can we invade a country? Fucking Canada's right up there. Can we just like go fucking like, you know, people say to me all the time, 9/11, never forget, never forget. But it seems somehow we have forgotten what happened over 20 years ago. And in moments like this, we need to remind New Yorkers how terrible that day was. Now, who, you may ask, is going to remind them? I'm gonna remind them right fucking now. You already have Boeing planes falling from the sky. What's a few more crashing down, say, directly onto Andrew Cuomo's house? In fact, let's send some buses, fast and free, and plow right through that motherfucker's house. Is that a plane? Is that a plane right now? Oh shit, what time is it? Oh, we have a 9/11 happening right now. Yes. Yes. Which room in the White House is mine? You're telling me I can't stay at the White House? You know who the fuck I am? I'm the mayor of New York, goddammit. Now, there's been a lot of racism surrounding this campaign, but you know, there's been something even worse. Islamophobia, specifically directed at me. And we made a database of everyone who's been talking shit, so we're about to be coming for your ass. By the way, what is going on with JD Vance? Why is that guy feeling up on Charlie Kirk's wife? What's going on with that? Now, people have called me many times, before and after my campaign, a communist, which I've never described myself as. I have always said that I am a democratic socialist. Now, what is the difference between communism and socialism? Fuck you, that's the difference. Stop asking me shit. I want to talk about safety for a moment and gun control. We need to get these guns off the streets and replace every single one of them with a personal Zulfikar. People ask me, Zohran, you're gonna give us childcare, you're gonna freeze the rent, you're gonna make buses fast and free. What are you gonna do in your downtime? I think I'm gonna kill people. You know, Donald Trump has been talking a lot about removing term limits for presidency, maybe talking about a third term. And that got me thinking, I'm removing term limits for mayor immediately. I'm here to fucking stay, baby. No, I mean, like, what does the mayor actually do? I mean, I only ran for this shit because I can't run for president. And don't forget, this is woke Sharia. If you get someone's pronouns wrong, execution. Woke Sharia means Pride Month is mandatory. If you're straight, you must kiss a man. Dare I say, even a little bit of fucking and sucking. Furthermore, everyone has to wear a hijab. Except for my wife, of course, she doesn't have to wear shit. Do I get a boat? Or like a house in the Hamptons? People always talk about trans athletes and whether they should be allowed to compete, that there's only 2 genders, that there's 3 genders, there's 4 genders. Well, I'm declaring as of today, transgender athletes will be allowed to compete in all competitions against all genders. And I will remind you, there is not 2, there is not 3, there is only 1 gender, and that is Islam. Prostitution is illegal? Dude, that's fucking legal. That's legal today. What do you mean? We're making that legal. Remember, sex before marriage is haram. Unless it's gay sex. Woke Sharia. And if you eat pork, unforgivable. Not only will you be executed for doing something that is completely haram, the devil Shaitan himself will personally haunt you and your family for thousands of generations. Long beyond you've been a New Yorker, long after you've died, wherever you move, he will follow you. He will drag you straight down into hell, burn you over the coals, shove hot pikes straight up your ass. Can I at least get like fucking Arsenal tickets? Now if you would all join me in a moment of prayer. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allah, all my enemies who have wronged me, please forgive them. But also, kill them by hellfire. Andrew Cuomo, die by fire. Donald Trump, die by fire. Curtis Sliwa, die by fire. Hot dog stand guy who put too much ketchup on my hot dog, die by fire. High school teacher who told me I wouldn't be shit, die by fire. And that fucking idiot who got me on film asking me my reaction to Dick Cheney's death, die by fire. Ladies and gentlemen of New York, what you've just seen is Zohran Mamdani's transition from mayor of New York to supreme socialist LGBT Ayatollah, Qurans are in every school. The Statue of Liberty has become the Statue of Jihad. PE and sports have been replaced with Hamas combat training class, and 9/11 is happening regularly every day for some reason. What effect is this having on America? Surprisingly, the economy's soaring. Groceries have become affordable. Citizens have universal basic income, healthcare, and education. Women can't drive, but say what you will, traffic is halved. Crime is down. Violence is down, even though I've just seen a government-mandated beheading, which is the most violent fucking thing I've ever seen, so I have a good time figuring that one out. Gay marriage is legal and federally protected across all states in the country for the first time in America's history. I think this Islamic revolution is the best thing to ever happen to America.